Hayes Entertainment exclusive.
This is the hottest place for big name interviews in
Big Mike and
Vancouver.
Hayes Entertainment here. Today's episode, we got Cabbie Richards. That's Cabbie on the street.
Big
You
Mike.
go ahead there. If you like what we're doing, you hit the subscribe button right there. Here we go. Woo. Hey, Cabbie, I just want to say thank you very much, man, for coming on our show today. We really
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
What is it called again? What do
I
you guys
Only
have?
Touch Greatness podcast.
I Only Touch Greatness. Okay, wonderful. Well, then this is
That's why you're
you
here.
guys are lying to your audience right now because this is like someone else canceled and then someone else canceled and then I was the next one available, so I happily jump in.
Not at all, man. We're huge fans, especially growing up. We definitely watch you on the score all the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We're just going to throw some questions at you.
Okay,
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Toronto and I lived all over the city. I'd say mostly I lived in the West End before I was 12. And then when I was 12, I moved to a small town outside of Toronto called Cambridge, Ontario. It was about an hour away. And I went to high school there. And then I moved back to Toronto to go to Ryerson to take radio and TV. And that's how I snuck my way into the broadcast world in sports.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what made you get into broadcasting?
I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be like Will Smith and Denzel. And when I was in high school, I came up with this plan. I was like, well, let me learn about radio and television first as sort of a way to backdoor into film. It didn't work out that way. And then when I was at Ryerson, I was like, I should probably get an internship. And I was just lucky that a guy who was in a year ahead of me just saw myself and my friend Adnan Verk in the hall one day. He's like, hey, we need some interns at the score. At that time, it was called Headline Sports. Give me your resumes tomorrow, and I'll try to get you an internship. So I did. I wrote, and I didn't really have any production skills. The only thing I did in high school was I used to edit like the year-end athletic banquet video and then the football video, and I would just like infuse a bunch of movie clips, and I had like these like two VHS decks, and it was real DIY. But I'm throwing some Ace Ventura, some clips from like The Program, any sports movie or any motivational speech, I would put it in, and it would look great. And then there would be the grainy footage from our actual football team, which was like the quality level was like you guys are on the West. It would be like standing on the top of like Grouse Mountain, and then that would be like the Hollywood quality film, and then I would be, our football videos would be somewhere in on Granville Street, like where there are some seedy characters around, like that.
Yeah.
That was the quality and the difference.
No HD then.
Absolutely not. No, this is like 4x3 long play. You guys are some young bucks. You guys don't even know about the era of VHS tapes.
Hey, I'm
taping things off of television. How old are you?
37.
You look 27, you liar. Are you?
Hang on. Hang on.
But still, listen, a lot of people go bald early. Michael Jordan went bald early. He decided to shave his in like 1988 or 1989, and he was like 25 years old or 26, so no harm in that.
What gave you the idea of Cabbie on the Street, which we absolutely loved?
Thank you. Well, I was helped by Lisa Bose and Steve Coolias, who were weekend hosts at the score, and they wanted to change the format of their highlight show and have a man on the street. And so they brought this idea to me, and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And at the time I was like auditioning. I was trying to like be some actor, and I was auditioning for commercials, and I'd, get one line here or there in like a Tim Hortons spot. And so I wasn't really that enthused about it. And then after about a week, I met a guy at work whose name was Brian. He was my man B, and he was fresh out of film school, and he had a camera. I was like, all right, well, this guy has a camera. I should go try some. All right, let me go do this man on the street segment. And I went out and asked people about Toronto losing the Olympic bid for the 2008 Summer Games in 2001. And I had a camcorder, and I had Brian shooting me and just asking random Canadians around City Hall. And it was pretty bad. And I made up these like really stupid mascot names, and it was just terrible. So I edited it and then showed the boss. He's like, do another one. So I did another video, and I was asking people about the national anthem being played before sporting events, and if people agreed that it should still be played. People were like 50-50. Again, I just was accosting random Canadians on the streets of Toronto. And at the end of the piece, we had people singing "O Canada." So I just chopped it up, and there was a clip of me singing "O Canada" as well. I was singing to a baby in a stroller, and then the baby started to cry. So then my boss is like, okay, this is funny. So that was the very first Cabbie on the Street, which aired in July of 2001. So I've been at this for a little while. And so without the help of Lisa Bose and Steve Coulias, I may have just been another guy, eating a donut in a or some kind of like a turkey sandwich in a Tim Hortons commercial.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it. There wasn't a night that you're up partying and the score wasn't on in the back on the TV. And I appreciate how much hard work you must have done on putting those clips together. I'm the guy that makes the videos for us too. So
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. Well, you understand like those marathon shifts in the edit suite, like editing literal frames, removing, moving video clips a few frames, and then you have to get the right audio mix. And then it's like, oh, what's the transition here? And then, oh, can I put a graphic here, or like maybe some text? Oh, let me change the size of the text because it's covering someone's face. Or I totally know that.
And then all the audio gets made in Pro Tools, right?
Oh, nice. Yeah. See, I'm working on a Connor McDavid interview right now, and in the quarantine I've taught myself how to edit. And it's like a McDavid interview. He doesn't do well with me. He doesn't do that many interviews, and because he's such an electric player and the face of the league, I want to like give it its proper due. So I'm like on these tutorials on YouTube trying to learn how to do particular effects, and it's a daunting task, and I want to try to publish it before the NHL resumes. So that's the current project that I'm working on. Much like yourself, you're stuck in edit suites, like making videos, make them pop.
And I understand that when somebody big like that, you want to make it the best project possible. That's how I felt about my Theo Fleury interview.
Nice.
Yeah, so I had to make the video, and you talk about the video, but then you talk about like when he's talking about the 87 brawl. So then you play the clip of the 87 brawl and having to clip things in. I enjoy that stuff.
Yes, I know exactly that struggle.
Yeah. I let my buddy know that I was interviewing today, so he threw out a question for me to ask you here.
Okay.
I'm going to shoot for you. You've had and still do have one of the most unique and fun interview styles that has come to sportscasting in Canada within the last 20 years. How did you come up with the inside your bubble interview style? Who influenced you to come up with that style?
I don't think I had any direct influences. When I was first starting out, there was a guy on BET. His name is Al Shearer, but he had a character named Hits from the Street, and he would go to like American U.S. colleges, and he would interview people very much as a man on the street, but he would kind of make fun of them, and that's where a lot of the humor came from. With me, I wanted to make fun of myself because I just thought it was more endearing, and also like I just didn't feel comfortable making fun of people. I'm not really that kind of a person. So he was fearless, man. And sometimes he would dress up in like different characters, and it just seemed like he had no off switch. So I think that maybe informed me a little bit. But as far as like the way I interacted with athletes and stars is I wanted to treat them like they were my friends. And I'm a pretty big guy, and I'm gregarious, and I'm like very touchy. Like I'll put my arm around guys, whatever, handshakes. And so I just wanted to let them know like we were the same, even though they had this extraordinary talent and they were very well compensated for this talent. I wanted to let them know like man to man that we're just like the same dudes. We, often buy the same kicks, like probably the same movies and listen to the same music, that kind of stuff. So it was a way to disarm them, because generally people never, like if you're an interviewer, you're putting the microphone in a guy's face, and that's pretty much it. You're not ever, and you might shake their hands afterwards, or you're not like hugging them. Or I used to put like my face against like dudes' chests, or I put my face against their face. See how far I could push the boundaries. And sometimes I did, and sometimes people hated them. There are guys like Jaromir Jagr hated the interviews. Chris Drury was another guy who didn't like them. That was my next question, actually. Was like, you have a very unique style, and we loved it. But like I was going to ask, who had the weirdest or negative reaction to your style? Yeah. So Yager was one. Yager once, as I entered the dressing room, he's like, "Are you gonna ask me stupid questions again?" I was like, "Yes, yes, I am." And it's kind of like, it's a little bit embarrassing to have someone just kind of blow you up like that as you enter the room, and there are 20 or 30 people there. But whatever. I just knew that the audience didn't care about the process; they just wanted to see the final product. So I just took those lumps, and whatever, it was just part of the gig. And I didn't think he was being malicious. He was kind of just using me as the butt of the joke, which is fine because I often put myself in that position to be the butt of the joke because I think the audience would enjoy it a little bit more. But so Yager was one of those dudes. Amari Stoudemire once. Raja Bell, when he was playing with the Phoenix Suns, Raja Bell told me that Amari Stoudemire was the guy that lost the most money on the team playing when they're playing cards. So I brought that up in an interview, and he had a tattoo, I think of maybe like a coat of arms or one of like, I think there was a card or something on his arm. And I made reference to the tattoo. Oh, did you get that tattoo because you lost like 15 grand? Ooh, he did not like that. Because the tattoo was probably something real personal. And he was like, what? So what kind of bleeping questions are these, man? And it was Amari Stoudemire, me, my camera guy, my man D. That was it. We were the only ones in the Suns locker room. And then Leandro Barbosa just sort of meanders in, just minding his own business. And then he looks at Barbosa, like, what kind of questions are these, LB? What the bleep, man? So I was like, heat just started to rush up my face. I was like, I need to get out of here because it was just getting real uncomfortable. I didn't think he was going to strike me, but just the vibe, it just changed like that. It was my fault because I insulted him by insulting one of his tattoos. So he didn't like it. The last time I got one of those reactions was DeMarcus Cousins in 2016. We were at the NBA All-Star game in Toronto. And it was first thing in the morning. It was probably 9:15, and the Western Conference All-Stars are in this conference room. It was at the convention center, and each player is on this like platform, and they're sitting there almost like on a kind of a throne. And it's sort of hard to get to the guys because they intentionally have this area where the players have a lot of space, and then the media is beyond that space, like a little pod.
Yeah.
So I sort of, I ambushed him at the side of the pod, and then I was just asking him questions about being referenced in hip-hop songs. And I think Boogie Cousins had been referenced in one or two songs. But I got so close to him, he's like, yo, man, why are you so close to me right now? And I was like, oh, I just want you to hear me. He goes, I can hear you from there. But because it was the first thing in the morning, and that's probably the last thing he expected to happen in an interview, he didn't take to it too well. So it's happened a few times.
That's tough, definitely.
A pleasurable experience, but every once in a while you get one of those that it's a fun story to tell.
It definitely comes up once in a while when you're in contact with somebody. One thing you're saying, though, how even you just wanted to get into it and get your name out there, and just even if you're doing interviews and they're awkward at sometimes, but you're trying to get your name out there and build your own resume, right?
Yeah, it was more just because I just knew that nobody was in this lane that I was traversing myself. Like I was infusing pop culture into sports. And I suppose Bill Simmons, in his writing on ESPN, he was the first journalist he was referencing like 902. He was referencing like TV shows in his writing. But I was, when I was talking to athletes, I was asking them about sneakers, mixtapes, girls, restaurants. Like it was like a lot of lifestyle questions. And I wanted to know about them versus the game that they played. Because there was a lot of analysis about the game, a lot of X's and O's and that sort of thing. And I'm not an expert by any stretch, nor am I really a journalist. I was there to entertain the audience and then inform second.
You've interviewed like the biggest names in sports: Jordan, Bryant, Ovechkin, McDavid, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. Like, what's that feeling, man? And how do the encounters go? Do you remember one more than the other?
I remember them all. And they're pretty special. It's like when you get to stand next to or interact with greatness, it's a different kind of feeling. And
that's what we're doing.
The interactions are. What's that?
That's what we're doing right now, interacting with greatness.
Not quite. This is like there's like an A list and a B list. Right now we're somewhere around the O or the P list. We're well down the line here. But interacting with some of these guys, what I was going to say was you don't really get that much time because these athletes get asked every day, like by dozens or hundreds of people for their time, whether it's to appear at an event or to go somewhere, or if they could do an interview or whatever. And these guys have lives outside of their sports, so their time is very limited. So so generally the interview, like the slots are anywhere between 4 minutes and 8 minutes. Every once in a while, I'll get to spend maybe 12 minutes with someone, but they're pretty short. So you got to get in and get out. And to build a rapport with someone quickly, it's more of an art than a science. You have a little bit of small talk and then the camera's rolling, but these guys have been interviewed so many times that many of them, like Russell Wilson, is an absolute pro. He knows, like, when the camera's on, smiles come out, and he's a very eloquent speaker and he's great. And when I got to interact with either Kobe or Michael, who were the guys that on the Mount Rushmores in their eras, and certainly Michael Jordan is still on the Mount Rushmore of greatness. Definitely. I think across all sports. And I had many more interactions with Kobe than I did with Michael, but Michael moves the air in the room. Like he affects the space. And I felt that once when President Obama attended Game 2 of the NBA Finals, which were the Raptors versus the Warriors. He was Commissioner Silver's guest. So when Obama was like at the NBA Finals, it was like the whole building felt different because, he was 2 years removed or 3 years removed from being the most powerful man in the world. And then you just see the different Secret Service guys like in the bowels of the Scotiabank, like, what's happening? Like, oh my, and then it's like the whispers, like, Obama's here. Like, what? Obama's here? It's pretty crazy. So even though I may look at these people with wide eyes because I revere their talent and like these guys are super famous, I realize that my time is very short, so I can't fanboy too much because I have to ask the questions that I prepared, sort of get in and get out and let them, continue on with their day. And if we happen to form some kind of relationship or a friendship afterwards, that is an added bonus.
What's Drake, Khalifa, and Kendrick Lamar like?
All right. So Drake, I've interviewed 3 times. So I probably run into Drake maybe like 10 or 12 times. Super chill, always really nice, very cordial. Kendrick is a lot smaller than you think. Like, he's a small dude, but his brain obviously is kinetic, and his wordplay and his dense lyrical content and in his craft of being an MC is otherworldly. And he was super cool. Like I always my goal is to try to make somebody laugh. And I got Kendrick to laugh a couple of times when I asked him about various people that might kill his vibe, because one of his most famous songs is Please Don't Kill My Vibe. It was his biggest song at the time. And I got him on a question. I was like, sometimes when people tell you they're from a city, they're like, or from a certain neighborhood, or from a city, and then you ask them more questions about the neighborhood, like, oh, so you guys are in Vancouver. But really, like, if you're from Surrey, you might say you're from Vancouver, but then once you start digging in and you find out the person's really from Surrey, be like, yo, why didn't you say you're from Surrey in the first place? Like, those kind of people that want to inflate, their status or whatever. I was like, do those people kill your vibe? He's like, yeah, it's a good one. I asked him if like Dwight Howard kills his vibe. He said yes, because Dwight Howard, I think, did 1 year with the Lakers and then bounced to Houston because he just wasn't a fit with Kobe and Steve Nash or whatever. And then Wiz Khalifa, he probably, I don't know if it's in his rider, but Wiz was smelling hella earthy that day. Like, it took about 45 minutes. We had the interview. He had a show at 7. We got there like 3. I don't think Wiz did the interview till like 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And my guy was just in a great mood. He was like, he really lives that life of enjoying the finest herbs that the earth can provide. So he was a pretty fun dude. He's from Pittsburgh, so I just asked him some like Pittsburgh sports stuff, and I had him freestyling, which I couldn't use this part. So he was freestyling and using like different sports teams. So the Steelers, Pirates, and the Penguins, because those are the 3 professional teams. But what he said in those bars, I couldn't put on TV. So no one's ever been able to see that, but I remember that fondly because he just, said words that you can't say on TSN. You know what I mean?
That's one thing. Last night we interviewed Little Flip,
Okay.
and right after you coming up, we got Busy Bone from Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Wow, nice. Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so
I hope Busy Bone can tell you a couple of Biggie stories, because back in those days when they were recording, I think everybody recorded together.
Yeah.
Versus now where you just send a verse over an email.
There's that one picture where they're all in the studio, and there's like Bone Thugs, there's Biggie, there's Puffy, Nas was there, Wu-Tang was all in the same studio, all in this picture from New York back in the day. So one of my questions definitely is going to be touching on the Biggie.
That's
and then
I wonder if how Biggie, or just being around those guys, like just subconsciously it affected them or informed them, maybe even changed their style, or just maybe their writing process.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure, because, you know, being around those heavyweights and those icons in hip hop, even at that time, it's got to rub off on you in some way.
It must. And to be in part of one of the biggest groups of all time, I say the biggest group of all time.
Bone Thugs?
Yeah. They're easily number one.
What? Bone Thugs isn't even in the top 20 of biggest hip hop groups of all time. Are you kidding? Listen, Bone Thugs, listen, they have an era, they have a time, you know, mid-90s, and then nobody really came out of Cleveland, Ohio. But you have NWA, you have Run DMC, you have Outkast, you have Mobb Deep, you have Wu-Tang, you've got Beastie Boys, you've got oh my goodness. I don't know if you call TDE a group. That's more of like a clique. But I don't know.
I grew up loving only the West Coast, so I never really cared. Other than Wu-Tang, I didn't care for anybody out the East Coast. I was all Death Row. And that Daz and Krupp, that'd be group number 2. NWA is definitely in the top 1 or 2.
Yes, absolutely. So you can't put Bone Thugs.
No.
In, like, maybe because you're West Coast sensibilities, maybe they go in the top 10 because there aren't that many groups from the West Coast. But then you have and then even
West Side Connection.
You have West Side Connection. Bow Down. That was. I mean, they had a couple of records. I mean, I don't know how influential they were in the culture, but they had a couple of records. Yeah. Anyway,
it's West Coast biased.
That's fair.
How was it getting doused with champagne from Powell?
It burns. It burns your eyes. Oh, if you're ever in a celebration where there's champagne being passed around or potentially being, doused over someone's head, get some kind of eyewear. Now I understand why. And baseball was the first sport that I saw where guys were wearing goggles. I stole the idea from Pedro Martinez in 2004 when they finally won the World Series. They beat the Yankees in 2004, and then they just dominate. I think they beat the Cardinals in like 6 games, where no one really remembers that series. Or maybe they beat the Cardinals in 2007. No, they beat the Rockies in 2007. Anyway, when I started covering the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2008, I wore a yellow poncho and swimming goggles because I knew someone was going to spray me with champagne. And Dominic Hasek sprayed me with some champagne, and somebody else sprayed me with champagne, but it didn't get in my eyes. Now, Norman Powell fully, and I at the end of the interview, I thought I was supposed to ask him one more question. So I'm so he's next to me, and I'm looking at my producer oh, did I forget something, or did I F up? And that's when Norman, boom, behind me, boom, this is for all the stupid interviews that you do, and they just soak me with champagne, and it legit burns your eyes. So beware, fellas.
You left TSN in 2019. Now you're working with Bleacher Report, correct?
That is correct.
What was the big change for?
It was an opportunity to go work with a brand and a media company that I was professionally jealous of for many, many years. Bleacher Report was always in the middle of the conversation of whatever was happening, whatever big moments were happening in sports. Bleacher either had a post or some graphic about it, or they were just so fast, or it was so fast to respond to these huge moments in sports. And I was just I don't know how do these guys do it? Do they have a farm of these graphics ninjas, or do they have just a whole college of these whiz kids that are able to just mine these moments from all over the place? I mean, in football, it could be somebody, hurdling another player, and then all of a sudden they have a graphic of that other player being a hurdle on a track, or Patrick Mahomes can throw a no-look pass, and then 6 minutes later, the clip is on Instagram, and that's where I discovered, because I wasn't at that time watching Kansas City, and I don't know what game it was, but anytime there was a big moment, Bleacher Report always had a commentary or a post about it. And when the opportunity came up to go work for it, I was like, man, I want in, because this is like they do the work that I love, so I want to be a part of that.
Definitely, I'm a big fan of Bleacher Report.
Nice.
I got 5 fantasy football teams, so I take it. I take Bleacher Report really seriously.
5 fantasy football teams. That's a lot of work, and you have really with 5 teams, you have no allegiance to any team. You just have an allegiance to the players that are on your rosters.
I'm a Seahawks many game goer. I go to maybe 3 to 4 games a year.
Okay, nice. That's a lot.
But being on 5 fantasy teams, I do try to pick the same players for each team so I can cheer for them. But if you get that often, that bad time where you got to play against your own players from a different league. But
that's tricky.
If you pick, if you're smart enough and able to get the same players on each team, then you either win all the leagues or you lose
all the leagues.
You lose all the leagues. But
how did you do in 2019?
I went 3 for 5.
So you won 3 leagues? Wow.
5. And they're 225 Canadian buy-in. I have one that's 125 buy-in.
Good for you, man. I don't think I've ever won a fantasy pool. Granted, I'm not out there with like 5 teams. However, like congrats to you on drafting well, but then also watching that waiver wire. Those waiver wire acquisitions
are huge.
Through the season, huge.
Honestly, if you draft your team good enough, you don't need to touch the waiver wire until you have bye weeks and stuff. And by then, everybody's moved down. You're in the number 1 spot when the injuries and the buys start happening. And if you built your bench strong enough, you don't even need to use the waiver wire, and you save it to that number 1 spot till you need it. There's somebody
There's always somebody that comes out of nowhere that is an absolute stud, or some rookie that is.
Odell Beckham was, for me, a few years ago. Odell, I found him on the waiver wire, and then that's the year he did the one-handed catch, and I ended up winning. I won 4 of 4 that year, I think.
Wow.
So that was only
nice
in
work,
4.
Man. I gotta hit you up for some tips on my.
Hey, you sound like you're not winning any, so you.
No, I'm definitely not. No.
You're welcome to join my league. Those are the kind of people I want in my league.
No, thank you. I've given away enough of my money in the past.
What do you miss about TO so far? I know the whole city was pretty devastated when you left.
I don't know about that. I miss watching the Raptors, and I miss going to Raptors games. Just being in that building is one of the loudest in the NBA, loudest to me. And when they went on their 15-game winning streak earlier in the season, I had FOMO because I was like, I wish I was in the city just to feel that energy and just to commiserate with my homies and just, proudly, wave that Raptors flag. And the team is great on defense and has actually won more. They've won more games this season than the Clippers have, but they're still a big-time underdog, but a great cohesive unit. They have high basketball IQ. Kyle Lowry is just an underrated defender and just a great floor general. I have high hopes for them, but I'm cautiously optimistic as we are on the dawn of the bubble era, which started in a few weeks.
So they are coming back, though, the NBA.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
At this point, there's only a month until the season's going to resume on July 30th. All the broadcasters have lined up, and they've got the games that they're scheduled to broadcast, and the players have all rejoined their teams, getting tested for COVID-19 daily. So that ideally they want everybody to be negative before they go into the bubble, so that there's a very small chance of anybody getting infected with the coronavirus. But who knows, man? Life is crazy, and if they don't test the staff at Disney World the same way they test the players, then there's a chance of possible infection. But we'll see. It's a huge risk, but it's a risk that some people are willing to take for our entertainment.
See, I'm a hockey fan, so I don't really follow the basketball. But so it's all being done down there in Orlando.
Correct. Yeah, it's all at Disney World, contained in that one hub. I mean, NHL is doing it in Edmonton and Toronto, 2 hubs, which would be a little bit different. And I'm sure Edmonton is obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but Toronto has more like entertainment options for the guys. And it hasn't been outlined yet, like what kind of procedures and rules that the players are going to have to adhere to or abide by. Obviously in Orlando, you can't leave the bubble. If you leave the bubble, then you have to quarantine when you come back for 14 days. I don't know what it's going to be like in Toronto and Edmonton, but
a lot of hotel bars.
They might have to, yeah. And like
you can't leave the hotel, I wouldn't think. Unless
you go to skate and play a game. It's gonna be tough.
I thought that Vancouver should have been a good hub city. They got 2 monster towers plus the new hotel also in the park built there. It's all, and Nacolini's own 2 towers inside Rogers Arena, so they could just cross the street to Rogers Arena.
And Vancouver is a lot more fun than Edmonton.
Yeah,
a bunch of young dudes,
a lot better.
Way more fun. It's like 25 times more fun.
You've also been in a couple movies, The Red Sneakers and The Rats. What was that like?
Oh, goodness.
We're digging.
Yeah, you guys very well researched. Well, The Rats, I just played like a train conductor. I don't think anybody's ever asked me about this before. It was like a 1-day shoot, and I just played like, the train, it's fake New York City, and the train, stops or whatever. So I go investigate. I'll be right back. And of course I just get trampled and eaten by a bunch of rats. So I actually had rats crawl over my body.
Oh, no.
And I think I had about 200 or 250, and they're very warm. That's the part I didn't anticipate. And that movie paid for like my MacBook. I was so excited because I got a nice paycheck. I'm like, I'm going to buy a new MacBook. And this is the time MacBooks first hit the market. And it was like, the aluminum or like the silver cover. I mean, it's still the same casing. But so I was very happy to get that one. And I think it was on Fox. It was a made-for-TV movie as well. The Red Sneakers was also a made-for-TV movie, and I had a little bit of a bigger role. I was like the best friend of the main character, and that was like my most fun experience acting. And it was just a bunch of young dudes, and I'm still very close with the guy who was who played the main character. His name was Dempsey Papillon. He came to my wedding. We're still very close. Actually, we hung out in Vegas like 3 weeks ago. He actually introduced me to UFC, so he flew in for the Kamaru Usman fought Israel Adesanya. Stylebender fought in February, and the fight wasn't that great, but he's a huge Adesanya fan, and that was the last time I hung out with him. But it was great. Shout out to Mr. Hines, who was the director of the film, and who's no longer with us, but he was just a wonderful man. It was a lot of fun. I was like 21 or 22, and we're like high school kids, and we just acted like high school kids. It was a ton of fun.
So you're in Vegas these days then?
Correct. Yes.
You've been to a Golden Knights game, obviously?
Yes.
Yeah. What's that like?
It is probably the best on ice entertainment for a hockey team. They do an amazing job in the pregame with like they put on a show. It's you're in the entertainment capital of America, at least. I don't want to say the world, because I think Macau is up there too, but they really put on a great show, and it's great entertainment. I actually saw Golden Knights versus Leafs, and the Leafs lost, and then they fired Mike Babcock the next game before they went to Arizona. So that's the only hockey game that I saw, and all my peers and my coworkers are all American. So we went like as a squad, like 20 people at the Golden Knights game. So every time the Golden Knights scored, everybody would turn to me and like cheer. So then the few times, I think the final score was 4-2. So the few times that the Leafs scored, I was like, I was like one of the only, actually, no, there were a few Leaf fans in the building, but not that I'm a Leafs fan, because I don't really, my hockey team growing up was the Vancouver Canucks because I love Pavel Bure. And then I became like a Kings fan. But so I don't really have an allegiance to the Toronto Maple Leafs other than some friends of mine play on the team. But anyway, that night I was cheering for him, but I took an L. I took a giant L.
Cabbie, we can't thank you enough, man, for coming out today. Like, we really appreciate it.
My pleasure, fellas. This is Cabbie Richards, and you're listening to the I Only Touch Greatness podcast.
Hey, thank you, and we'd love to have you on again. This was great. I'd love to talk more sports.
Anytime. I'm always available. Hit me up.
Thanks, Cabbie. Really appreciate it, man.
Thank you,
Okay,
Cabbie.
you got it, fellas. Nice to meet you both.
Nice
Take
to
care,
meet
bro. Stay safe.
you. Take care.
You too, man.